To take your Uncle Tony in was a generous move from your grandmother, and I've read about Victor's fear of driving a couple of times, and that he held dinners for his friends who then had to draw a slip from a hat that determined who had to drive him on different days of the week. One 1966 Valley News article is about Victor finally overcoming his fear of driving. I've also read that he specified in contracts for his gigs that a four-door car or a limousine had to pick him up. I suppose that wasn't a vanity thing, but simply for comfort since he was a big man.
In around 1970, my Uncle Victor Charles came to El Cajon, California, where I was living with my father, Sonny, and my Uncle David Francis was with him. David Francis was doing all of the driving at that time. Victor Charles had a brand new black Cadillac, and he wanted David and me to take it to a car wash on Main Street. After it was clean, we picked up a girlfriend of mine and we drove around like kings. My Uncle Tony told me that when Victor Charles finally got up the courage to get his driving license, he didn't just drive around Hollywood, but he drove all the way across the numerous states of America. He forever was obsessed by being behind the wheel instead of being a passenger only.
I came across all his theater reviews in the newspaper archives. It was so amazing. They were brilliant, especially the ones for his Falstaff basically just consisted of gushing praise. I had the time of my life reading them all. I see he's still listed as one of the best ever to have played that role. Ron Miller interviewed Victor once and wrote in his book, "You ain't heard nothing yet," that Victor was such a powerful stage performer that I don't believe his movie and his TV fans ever experienced the real Buono if they hadn't seen him live on a theater stage. Reading that makes me, a young fan who can't see him live anymore, and I'm happy and sad at the same time.
I fortunately had the opportunities of seeing 3 of Victor Charles's performances. The first time I saw him performing on stage was when my father Sonny took my sister Renee and me to the Desert Inn in Las Vegas, Nevada in 1969. He was in a musical of all things and the production of Many Happy Returns, starring with Broadway stars John Wright and Pat Carroll. After his performance, we were sitting in a restaurant booth with him in the Desert Inn Casino. The restaurant was full of customers, and Victor Charles pointed out 2 strange-looking characters who were sitting alone, and he said to us, "See that man and the other woman over there? The way they're dressed, you would think they're bums, but they're millionaires." He personally knew who they were, and I've never forgotten his important lesson of not making conclusions by the way people look and how they're dressed. In 1974, I was living in North Park in San Diego, California, near the Old Globe Theater, and I had one of my most magical theatrical moments in my life. I was informed that my Uncle Victor Charles was in the rehearsal in Shakespeare's King Henry IV, Part 2. I got in touch with him and asked if I could visit, and he naturally said yes. At that time in my life, I never imagined ever becoming an actor, director, and playwright. I was quite naive in so many ways. I remember telling Victor Charles about the street theater group called Indian Magic, who performed for free in the Zorro Gardens in Balboa Park. His rehearsal was beginning, and Victor Charles told me to find a chair in the theater. I didn't quite know what I would be seeing. Soon the director ordered the actors to take their marks on the stage, and it began. The stage lights were lit, The actors' voices were heard, and the visual images of people prancing around a very large human figure on the middle of the stage was my Uncle Victor Charles. He was playing Falstaff with his amusing and authoritative dignity. It was at that moment that drove an inspiring message into my heart to become an actor in my future. I was so completely impressed by his performance, I don't think I was able to ask him one intelligent question later. He did offer me a wise piece of advice, softly saying, "Wayne, there are many great actors, but so few great playwrights. Be a playwright." I never forgot that. And when I wrote my first theater script in 1983, I thought of that special day when my Uncle Victor Charles was acting at the Oak Globe Theater. When 1978 rolled around, I went to see my Uncle Victor Charles acting at the Solari Theater in Beverly Hills, California, in the production of The Last of the Marx Brothers Writers. He played the leading role of Jimmy Bryce, an ex-vaudevillian comedy writer who lies in bed in his beaten-down hotel room and is soon surrounded by delusional images of his ex-wife and Julius Dumont, who plays all the Marx Brothers look-alikes. I remember sitting next to comedic actor Marty Feldman that evening. As I sat watching the play and enjoying all of the comedic antics, verbally and visually, my Victor Charles and the other two actors, there was a clear sadness somehow that I felt. Perhaps it was because Victor Charles was lying in bed dying instead of being the energetic Falstaff I once watched before. What I didn't know that night was I wouldn't ever see him again acting on a theater stage. Years later, in the early 1990s, I met up with executive director Craig Knoll of the Oak Globe Theater. We were standing outside the theater, and Craig Knoll shared his disappointment of the production, The Last of the Marx Brothers Writers, to me, because he had hoped it would have been staged on Broadway, but it never happened. He also shared he wasn't surprised that Victor Charles died so young. He knew Victor Charles as a teenager, learning the ropes of becoming an actor at the San Diego Junior Theater, and when he directed him at the Oak Globe Theater stage in Volpone in 1956, he knew he was highly talented and he could go far. He said to me, with Victor, everything had to be big. He smoked big cigars, ate big meals, and drank more than he should, and he ran as fast as he could. There was no slow walking or doing little things in Victor's life.
I had wondered, since Victor had such a great speaking voice, could he sing? He said in one interview he could sing and dance, but didn't like to show that off on TV, so he did his poetry. And when I found out he was in musical productions, I figured he could have at least been able to hold a tune. Was he a good singer?
For the time I lived with Victor Charles in Encino, California in 1965, I never heard him sing, whistle, or dance through the house or outside on the lawn. There isn't any doubt in my mind that he wasn't capable of singing and dancing, though. The one member of the family that did play music and sang was his grandmother, Myrtle Glass Keller, who I called Granny Grunts. She was living with us for a short while, and she had brought her organ piano and played and sung often in the living room. She was quite old then, in her mid-80s, and she soon died in 1969. Was Victor Charles a good singer? Well, knowing him, if he truly had a voice of an opera singer and could dance like Fred Astaire, he wouldn't have kept it from his fans because he adored hearing their applause.